We now have to move with similar rapidity towards the question of cracks in backsides. And this one was actually inspired by one of my colleagues. He was talking at a desk near mine about how she was relieved that she had seen the back of her plumber, who had been called on numerous occasions to fix a boiler. And this is how it worked out. Familiar ears sensed that the customary effervescence was absent in the tones of a colleague describing the crack which opened like a rail tunnel to Lower Scunthorpe every time her plumber hunkered down to examine the innards of a sullen boiler. It had, over several long and weary weeks, refused to respond to his seductive tinkerings. But then, in the grey of morning, it happened. His touch returned. He twiddled and the boiler rumbled in deep appreciation. With that, the plumber hitched up his jeans until the fleshy regions were no more than an unhappy memory. Perhaps joie de vivre would be over-egging his mood, but he shook his head from east to west in a gesture of self-approval as a triumphant smile spread across his face. Then he strode with spry steps towards the front door, a plumber for whom the drip of water was once more sweet melody. I will never have to see the crack in his bottom again, sighed my colleague that afternoon, and she spoke as one who has returned to daylight after glimpsing the Stygian depths. We all have to show our world our best feature if we are to advance in this life, I said. Some feel they have winning bottoms, others prefer a gracious smile. But my mind was already far away in the mists of another place. And in these columns, one of the things I like to do is sort of change the mood and enter a little bit of romance in place of the sort of ribaldry. Leaves fell in brown curls through the chilled autumn air, and the great crowd roared in the green imaginations of boys nosing manhood, whose fingers touched, cool and confident, high over the grass of conflict, where a goal had just been scored. In truth, only parents were watching, but the 12-year-old boy who had scored knew the goal looked good, and in his celebrations he was a prince, a king, a god. Could you rise any farther? And the slap of hand palms between him and the other boy whose pass had set up the goal reflected that. We will remember this, and I will remember you, even when the coals burn low in our old age. By God, the coals are starting to burn low already, I feel, in my back. But a movement of hands is swifter than words. It was a gesture copied from black communities in urban America, where street cool is almost as important as life itself. And way back it probably carried a sense of racial pride. These days, though, it is a universal way of saying, well done, I admire you. The old British thumbs up once performed a similar function, but now appears decidedly uncool. Only Paul McCartney, who in many ways reflects the manner of another age, now lifts a thumb to indicate to his devoted following that things remain all right. And when he does that, you see the boy growing up in the 1950s. Comics, endless sun, bikes lying on the ground with the back wheels still whizzing, cream soda, webbed wirelesses, freckled smiles, grazed knees, and cheap cricket bats on the cinder patch. There is also a hint of desperation in the thumbs up, the stoical stupidity of an ever-cheerful man in wellies who chased a runaway kite across a moor and is now disappearing from earthly view into the glooping mysteries of a bog, his thumb still cocked. Traditionally, the firm handshake, sometimes accompanied by a pat on the back, was considered a sufficient demonstration of emotion for most purposes. It would hardly vary in delivery, whether it marked the death of a spouse or the news that you had been promoted at work. Our feelings were held tight then. Touching was not encouraged. It is true that bold boys and girls, sitting side by side in the picture palaces, would occasionally edge their hands towards the divide between the plush, spring-back seats in the hope that their little fingers would meet in a rapturous tingle. But in the 1960s and 70s, with the changes in fashion, the mood was becoming more relaxed, suggesting that demonstrative clothes and gestures went together. It was then that I sloped around the town, hunched and brooding, with the collar raised on my black leather jacket in the pose that imagined that I imagined would be favoured by poets. Peace, man, we said to strangers. What a wonderful statement a raised collar was. The boy with a flat collar was a swot, a conformist, the seeker of advancement in the office, and may I say so at this stage, very probably an international banker. But raise that collar and you were a rebel. In those days we were hesitant about overt displays of affection. Hugging and kissing were for the bedroom. However, these days people, often with jeans halfway down their backsides, talk with their bodies, waving their hands about. Even so, I feel that the crack on the face should be seen and the one on the bottom hidden. There endeth this lesson.